Hi everybody, this is Courtney with Fiber Fox Studios, and today I'm actually going to do, it's not exactly a tutorial, it's more of a kind of a walkthrough of instruction on how to use one of the mosaic designs as a border for a project. So if this were a blanket, this would be a blanket border, or you can build out pillows like what I'm doing. Here's another example from a previous week. So the main thing I want to point out right here in the beginning before we get started on the how to do this part is if you're working with a pattern that ends with a +3. So this pattern right here, which I will link all the patterns down below in the description, but this pattern is a remastered version of number 14, and it is done in a 10+3 multiple. So that +3 means that my design repeats begin and end evenly. If you choose a design that is a +4, so any of the multiples that end with a +4, when you're doing your setup, which this will make sense once you get on into the video, but when you're doing your setup, you need to keep in mind that a +4 pattern needs one additional stitch at the end of the row to even out the design. So in this example right here, I just had to worry about 10 stitches. Every 10 stitches would create one of these patterns. That's the space that I needed for, let's say, a multiple of 12 plus 4. I would do 12 stitches, 12 stitches, 12 stitches, and then the very last repeat of the pattern, I would actually need 13 stitches to complete it. So keep that in mind on the orientation of the patterns. On my ones that end with a +4, those require one additional stitch of the repeat to be done. So you restart the repeat for one stitch at the end of your row, and you will need to include that when you're mapping out and planning out where you can place your border. So like I said, this is not a tutorial. I won't be taking you stitch by stitch. I'm just going to take you guys through the general concept of doing this and how I work the corners. That's more what I focused on, because once you see how you go about marking and figuring out how many repeats of a pattern you can fit on each side of something that you're placing a border on, then it's just a matter of you figure out where you can work, what parameters, and then you're working around these corners. And I suggest a way to do that that is pretty simple. And you guys, of course, can get creative as you want with this concept once you dive in and understand how I do this. It can be done with any of the patterns. You can use absolutely any of them. Just keep in mind, if it's a +3, you don't have to worry about anything other than the main multiple. If it's a +4, you have to worry about the main multiple, and then on your last repeat, you will have to add one more stitch so that your pattern will end evenly. So to start out doing our border, we're going to first pretend that this is a blanket. So it's a small swatch, but I did want you guys to kind of envision that this is a blanket or anything else that you would want to put a border on. So most of the time we are doing borders on blankets, but you might want to work a pillow in this manner where you build out, essentially doing almost like a border around your center to build out and create the shape of your pillow that you're making. So there's lots of ways that you can use this technique. The very first step that you guys are going to need to do for any border that you're wanting to put on a project is you're going to have to work a row of single crochet all the way around the project. We're going to treat that as if it is row 1 of the design that we're going to work next. So row 1, I went around and I've bordered all the way around, just working one single crochet into each side of the row, one single crochet into each stitch. We're going to go around and do that again a second time. I still like to start out in the corner to add my next row. So I'm going to find a stitch here in the corner, and then I go into that stitch. And now all we need to do is add our single crochet row all the way around. So I'm going to grab my yarn. So nothing really different here. We just add our single crochets all the way around, and we do a chain 2 at the actual corner. So now we're going to begin working down the side. I stay working in the back loop only. So I still do the mosaic crochet just like we normally would. Nothing really changes about that. So we're just going to continue on around doing what is going to be row 2. This is going to count for row 2 of the pattern that you're going to be adding around this as a border. So we're here at the first corner, and since we're just laying out our first few foundation rows to get started, there's nothing too tricky here at the corner that you need to do. As you can see from my previous time around, I work 2 stitches into my corner stitch. So I do a stitch, which is a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet back into that same stitch. But one ends up being on this side of my work, and the other is on the next side, in this case the long side. So now we're going to work here into this next stitch, and I'm going to work into this first part of the chain 2. I'm working into that actual stitch, so that becomes my corner here. Now I'm going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to go into the next chain 2 space. If you look right here at the corner, I'm going to go into that second part of the chain 2, and I'm actually working into that stitch. So we go in there, and I'm just working in the back loop on all these. I'm going to place a single crochet. Now I just continue on down the side, just like normal, placing a single crochet all of my stitches, and then I will repeat this same thing on all of my corners. So I will work into that chain 2 space, taking the first chain of the chain 2 space, doing a single crochet, then chaining 2, and then placing a single crochet in the second chain of the chain 2 space. So that's how I do that. We'll be back when you're ready to work on row 3 and start laying down the mosaic work. So now that we've gone all the way around our project, whatever that project is, we've gone all the way around. Now we need to count our stitches. So I like to count all my sides, but if you're confident that you definitely have the same number of stitches after we've added these 2 rows, same number on this side as you do on this side, then you can of course just count one side. But I'm going to count my top and my side minimum. You have to, because we need our stitch count so that we can figure out what design we can fit in the space that we have to create our border. So that's your next step. You can do this. I'm going to do it off camera. You're going to start. I like to mark my corners. And I like to start in my corner. So then I'm going to mark that chain 2 as the start and where I am starting my count. So I'm going to mark my start of my count and my end of my count. And I want to do the same thing. Whatever you do here on this corner, you want to do on this corner. So I'm going to use one of my chain 2s as my first stitch that I'm going to count. So I'm going to select this as a working stitch, essentially. I know I'm going to work into that stitch versus skipping over it and just keeping that increase going at the corner. So I'm going to mark this one. I'm going to count all the way down here. And I also know that I'm going to grab up one of the stitches down here that's a chain 2, so that I'm keeping everything even. So hopefully that makes sense. So do your count, mark where you're ending and beginning your count, and then meet back up with me for the next step. So I've done my counting. I counted from corner to corner, and I have a total of 32 stitches here on my short side. On my long side, I have 42 stitches. So it just worked out. Sometimes you're going to have an odd number. You'll have 33 and 43. And you just have to adjust where you're going to stop and end the mosaic work in order to compensate. And then we work around our corners, just working single crochets and doing our increase at the corner. So I'm going to take you through those steps for a few rows, but we need to now, after we've bordered out and added our first 2 rows of our design, so our setup rows, after those are done, we're going to count. Now, after you've counted and you look at the pattern that you're wanting to use, I'm going to do pattern 14, I believe it is. For pattern 14, all I need to do is come in a stitch because I have 32 stitches on my short side and I have a multiple of 10. So I don't need 2 of these stitches. So in this case, I don't need to move anything. I can just know that I'm going to start my mosaic work in the stitch directly next to the one that I've marked. If you're having to move it, let's say you ended up with 34 stitches. You would move in 2 stitches from the corner and mark that as where you're going to start the pattern. And you will move in 2 stitches from the opposite corner and mark that as where your pattern should be ending before you just work single crochets and an increase at the corner. So for this one, I don't have to make a move, but if you did, if it was 6 stitches, whatever it is, you would just move your marker in and you're going to mark where you're going to start, and then you're going to move the marker in and mark where you're going to stop. So it really just depends on what you're choosing and the size of your project as to how this is going to work out. So I'm going to go here into the stitch right next to where I've marked. So this will be my first stitch of the repeat. And I'm going to add my yarn on and literally just work exactly like I would. So in this case, I actually have to do a double crochet in the first stitch of the repeat. So we're going to do that here together. So I'm working on my short side. I'm in the first stitch that I need to begin my repeat in, and that happens to be a double crochet. So I joined on and chained up 1. And now I'm going to go directly down to grab up that stitch and do my double crochet. And then I have 8 single crochets followed by 1 double crochet to end the repeat. So we're just going to work our repeats down the side. So I've done the first stitch of the repeat, which is a double crochet. So I'm going to start doing my 8 single crochets. There's 1. Now I need to end the repeat with 1 double crochet. So identify that stitch and slide down. Now I'm going to start my repeat again. So I've just completed 1 repeat here on the side. I'm going to start the repeat again. So it starts with a double crochet. I want to fold back. I don't want to miss any of my stitches. So I definitely want to keep a check on that all throughout while I'm working. So that ends our repeat. And you can see where we've made it to the corner. So now that we've made it here to the corner, we need to think about this other side. We would have, in my case, I'm having to start 1 stitch in front of where I marked for my sides because I'm over 2 stitches. So on each side, I ended up having 2 more stitches than what I needed, which is fine. We just adjust. So we're here at the corner, and this is how we're going to work all of our corners. This is the way I suggest anyway. So we're right here at the corner, and we're right here's our next stitch. So we just single crochet, chain 2 to increase, and then single crochet again. So in my case, I'm working around this yarn that I've used as a stitch marker. You won't have all that extra. So now I'm ready to begin my next side. So I know I'm able to start, in my case, 1 up from my marker to keep my count even. So I'm going to go here into this next and begin the repeat. And the repeat begins with double crochet. There we go. So we begin with our double crochet. Now we start working 8 single crochets. Make sure you check your count and don't work in the wrong stitch to start out. There's 1. And then we double crochet to end the repeat. Okay, so nothing different. It's just like you normally do. Anytime you're working a project, keeping those repeats, you keep doing them all the way down your row. Your row this time just happens to be a short side and a long side of a project in this case, if you're doing a blanket. So I've made it up to another corner. I ended my pattern right before the corner. I did the single crochet, chain 2, single crochet right at the corner. And now I'm about to do the very first stitch of the repeat starting on my next side. So that starts with a double crochet. So you just have to kind of slide down here near that corner. It's probably going to be kind of tight, but you just get under the loop and do your double crochets just like you normally would. And that's all you need to do. So again, you just keep working your repeat. I just started it. I'm going to work it on down the rest of this row and then turn the next corner. I'm right here at the last corner for my little swatch. And I need to do my double crochet and then handle this corner. So we're going to do that together. So there's my next stitch. I'm ending my repeat, which ends with a double crochet. And now I need to identify the next stitch and do my single crochet, chain 2, and then I'm going to be doing a single crochet into the stitch that I have marked. So that's where I'm going to do my last single crochet for this round. And now I need to slip stitch. You can do the invisible join, whatever way you want to do. So I'm going to end my stitch with the color that I need to work what will be row 4 of the design. We're keeping count like that. So, and I'm going to do my single crochet that begins the repeat for row 4 of the pattern that I'm using. So there's my single crochet. And my pattern actually begins with a total of 4 single crochets. So I'm going to place 3 more. So now we're back and we're at the first corner that I'm coming to. My repeat is just ended and it ended exactly where it needs to. This right here is kind of my landmark for stopping the pattern. So my repeat is ended exactly where I needed it to so that my pattern stays even on this side. Now I'm here at the corner, and there's a couple ways that you can do your corners. You could become more creative as you work this, and you could do double crochets in here, still doing your chain 2 for your increase at the, corner. It's really up to you. I prefer to just work single crochets for a while before I get creative. So in this case, I'm going to place 1 single crochet right there, and now I'm into my actual corner stitch. So I'm going to place a single crochet in the first part of my chain 2. And then I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to find the second chain of my chain 2. So it's right there. And a single crochet in that. And then because I did 1 single crochet right here, I should have the same on this side after the corner. And then I'm back to the start of my repeat, which begins with 4 single crochets. So this starts my repeat now. I'm right there on top of the double crochet. You get the concept. I'm already forming a pretty interesting looking little corner right here. And you can get as creative as you want in the corner, but as you build it out, it does look really interesting just by itself. And then of course you have your mosaic pattern that is in between those corners. So hopefully this is helpful and answered those questions for those of you who weren't really sure how to set up and do this. So see, it's just working those repeats and working an increase around the corner. Until next time, bye for now.